Hello there. This is Karif Zachary, and you're watching All 24 News live from Algiers. Special coverage on Russia-Ukraine. The battle for Donbass looks to be underway in Ukraine as Russia concentrates its war machine on the eastern region, a major strategic, political, and economic target for the Kremlin. Having mostly pulled back from northern parts of Ukraine, Russia's long-anticipated offensive in the east appeared to begin in earnest on Monday, with its military forces unleashing attacks on a number of areas within the Donbass. What would Vladimir Putin need before he could claim success in his goal of liberating Ukraine's old industrial heart? And is that possible? Why is Ukraine's Donbass the main target? Such questions and more are raised with our panel of guests who are going to attempt to answer some of them. I'm joined via Skype by Volodymyr Solovian, political scientist at the New Geopolitics Research Network from Kiev, along with Mykola Trofimenko, rector of Mariupol State University and member of Mariupol City Council, as well as Denis Berktay, Turkish journalist in Ukraine, an expert on Eastern Europe. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. The discussion begins right after this break. And before we delve into discussion, let me share with you, dear viewers and guests, this info. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday evening that the battle for eastern Ukraine has begun and that a very large part of the entire Russian army now focused on this offensive. The Donbass is important for Ukraine. The region is home to much of Ukraine's industrial wealth, including coal and steel.
We can now confirm that Russian troops have started the battle for Donbass, which they have been preparing for a long time. A large part of the Russian army is now dedicated to this offensive. No matter how many Russian soldiers are brought here, we will fight. We will defend ourselves. We will do it daily. We won't give up anything Ukrainian, and we don't need what isn't ours.
Let me start with you, Mr. Volodymyr Solovian. Why is the Donbas region in Ukraine an important area for Russia? As an expert, how do you analyze the situation on the ground? And what can you tell us about the latest developments?
Thanks for having me. Yes, Donbas region is in a great importance for Russia because it was one of the main goal and a justification of the war for Russian regime to invade Ukraine. And obviously that on the eve of the 9th of May, the main state holiday in Russia, they will try to achieve success for them in Donbas region. And they may lead to, they will try obviously to encircle Ukrainian forces in Donbas, but it is a great issue whether will be any success for them. Because Ukrainian forces in Donbas region are most capable among Ukrainian forces, and they are well prepared. They really waited for such a development for many years. So I think that Russia will pay very high price for the demands and desires of its political leadership. But still in general staff, in Russian general staff, they have no courage to say to Putin that they cannot really achieve these goals without heavy losses, and they may prevent in several weeks, so maybe months, to crucial change for situation in military terms, when Ukraine will achieve much more Western weaponry supplies, and in such terms that may prevent to crucial developments in battlefields. But still, we don't know what will be the result of battle for Donbass. And what we may say that Ukrainian forces will not stay in just and wait for Russian offensive. We conduct quite successful counterattacks, and the main aim is not to encircle groups of Russian battalion groups, because obviously Ukrainian forces still don't have enough artillery potential, armored vehicles potential, but these maneuvers may prevent to slowing down Russian offense.
Very nice indeed. What about you, Victor Mykola Trofemenko? You are from Mariupol. What can you tell us about the situation on the ground there? And what's the morale of the people still there? And why is President Zelensky emphasizing on the Donbas region as the main target of Russia?
Actually, it's obvious that Putin, he was trying to take all the administrative territories of Donetsk and Lugansk regions of Ukraine, and especially Donetsk, to create the land corridor from Crimea to Russia. You know that they have these problems with the water supplies and with the another supplies of goods and other electricity and other facilities, actually. What's happening on the ground in Mariupol? Mariupol is totally devastated. More than 500,000 people city is totally ruined, and Russians, they're bombing it with different kinds of weapons. All the houses, multi-storied buildings, maternity houses, my university is totally destroyed, actually. And I don't know, but Mariupol, it was very annoying. Its development was very annoying to Putin and to the so-called People's Republics, because it was very dynamically developed city, flourishing, with a very good perspective, with a lot of investments from the Western countries. And we tried to build Europe actually in Mariupol, and we succeeded in a lot of issues and questions. And it was very annoying to Putin to show that Ukrainian city of Donbas could be developed more than, for example, Donetsk. That's why I do believe that's why he is totally destroying, very cruelly destroying our city, with he has no power to admit that there are no green corridors, the people to be evacuated. Actually, I fled out from Mariupol in the middle of March, but it was my personal, I choose this way personally, actually. And I took my family in the car, and we fled out through the minefields. It was very dangerous, with a lot of bombings around. And one of these, when I was going from occupied territories of Zaporizhia, this region of Ukraine, to Zaporizhia, actually, the line of cars with the white ribbons, with the inscriptions "children" inside, it was bombed by Russians. And they're telling us, and their Minister for Foreign Affairs and the President Putin and their officials, they're telling us that they don't bomb civilian objects. But I'm actually a witness. I was a witness, and I saw how the Russian jets, they bombed the civilian districts, neighborhoods and houses with their huge inscriptions, "children." You've seen our drama theater with the 1,500 people with the children inside, civilians, with no military, with no soldiers. Actually, it's what the word genocide means. This is what happens in Mariupol, actually. And it's 100%, 1,000%, it's a crime against humanity. And it should be punished And I do believe that the international society will condemn all what Putin is doing. I was born in Mariupol. I am a rector of state university. I have a degree in political science, degrees actually. And I don't understand actually from what they are deliberating us. They deliberated us from our homes, our very happy life, and they destroyed our peaceful city. And the reason, I don't know why, actually. The
Very
Russian-speaking, fully Russian-speaking city, it's totally destroyed. And the people that cannot flee out from the city, they can't do this because there are no green corridors. You can do this only by your personal car. You could do this because now they created filtration camps. And for example, the filtration camp next to Mariupol, you should reach it by foot. It's about 30 kilometers, this filtration camp. And they have the queue of 3,000 people to pass this filtration camp. And today, for example, for the last 3 weeks, passed only 250 people. And they have 3,000. So you have to wait 5 months there in the fields with no food, with no water, because they're taking and keeping Mariupol in totally siege with no supplies. I was thinking every morning what my son, of a 5-year-old son, will eat, because it was a challenge to find the food in the 21st century in the center of Europe. It's a
very
crazy,
unfortunate indeed. Yes,
situation.
we can only imagine how grave the situation on the ground is like. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Denis Bakhtai, how do you, as a foreigner living in Ukraine, see this advancement? Why is Donbass considered a main target for Russia? And is Russia going to stop there? How serious is the damage of the Russian recent strikes? Western Ukraine have rarely been targeted by bombardment, and now no city is spared, apparently. Why this expansion now?
Well, first of all, I have been living and working in Ukraine for 15 years. So for a long time, I have been living in Ukraine. And I can say that there are lots of similarities between the Turkish mentality and Ukrainian mentality from some aspects, and from some other aspects. Between Turkish and Russian mentalities also there are some similarities. When we look at the similarities between Turkey and Ukraine, I can say that they are both countries which have been located between the East and the West. And in this situation, it can be, having a country at the crossroads between East and West, it can be both an advantage and a disadvantage. If you have a strong state, then this might be an advantage, because in this situation you will be able to control all those crossroads. But if you are not strong enough, then neither the Western powers nor the Eastern powers will not wish to give you a chance to live. And we observe this in Ukraine. Russia, on the one hand, doesn't want to accept that Ukraine is now an independent country, because when we look at the speeches of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, we can see this. We can see that the Russian leaders acted with some humiliation towards Ukraine. However, when we look at the Western world, the Western world is also doesn't accept Ukraine into itself. They also perceive Ukraine as a kind of buffer zone. In this situation also there is a similarity between Ukraine and Turkey, because in 1940s, with the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Union began to threaten Turkey. They demanded Turkish straits from Turkey, and in this situation, Turkey made a kind of mistake. We started to perceive the Americans, the Western world, just like our real brothers. So in this situation, the West also doesn't wish favor, I suppose. On the other hand, about the significance of the Donbass region for Russia, on some points I agree with Mr. Mykola Trofimenko. Yes, Mariupol is also a very important place, and indeed, Russia wanted to establish a corridor between the Russian territories and the Crimean Peninsula, which it had annexed 8 years ago. So, and in a large part, they have managed to do this. Secondly, I would like to add that the Donbas region is also important for Russia because in Ukraine it is the most, we can say, Russian-speaking territory, where a large part of the inhabitants were speaking in Russian, and pro-Russian sentiments were the highest among the regions in Ukraine. For this reason, since the beginning of the Soviet period, the Soviet and today's Russian rulers wanted to incorporate Donbas region into Ukraine, combine with Ukraine, in order to make Russification of the whole Ukraine. For example, after the Russian Revolution, a local revolutionist called Artyom in Donbas region, he created his own socialist republic, but Lenin told him to unite with the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in order to increase the weight of the pro-Russian people within Ukraine. They used to have such a policy, but now, after the event in Ukraine, now Putin decided to separate this region from Ukraine. But if it will be completely separated from Ukraine, it will be a great blow for Ukraine because it is the most industrialized region of Ukraine. On the other hand.
Very well indeed. Now, let me share with you this info. President Putin has said that sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine have failed, despite a warning by the mayor of Moscow that a boycott by Western companies will lead to a surge in unemployment. Back to you, Mr. Volodymyr Solovyin. Despite the severe sanctions imposed on Russia, President Vladimir Putin is still carrying what he calls special military operation against Ukraine. Why is Putin not considering the severity of the sanctions and their repercussions on his own people? Or do you think perhaps he has alternatives to save his country's economy?
Well, if we hear pulse among ordinary Russian on streets, we may notice that sanctions caused even another reaction among them. They mobilized. So the sanctions make pressure on Russian society, and they act as hermit kingdom that try to resist to Western pressure, and that Kremlin try to use this track of Western sanctions as a leverage to concentrate people and to mobilize them to war with Ukraine. But that doesn't mean that ordinary Russians want to join Russian forces on Ukrainian soil. Obviously, they like to watch war via TV screens on their federal channels, but that does not mean that they will to mobilize, and we are witnessing real problems with that amongst. That Russia faces with problems in terms of mobilizing new troops for sending them to Ukraine. But obviously, economical sanctions cannot achieve its goals in short term. It's about months or even years, and that is why Putin have enough time to provide this war until the victory. But I think that Kremlin right now should rethink its goals, and obviously Kremlin cannot achieve goals that were announced on the beginning of the campaign. So now they should rethink the results and try to find a way how to sell these results to their own people and to
Very clear indeed. Thank you. Richter Mykola Trofemenko, as you have seen, the mayor of Moscow warned that a boycott by Western companies will lead to a surge in unemployment. Do we see this as an indicator in which Russia's president's decisions may become unsatisfactory to Russian authorities and people? Or is the declaration of Moscow mayor just an expression of concern? Can we expect President Putin to be removed from power domestically by his own people, just like US President Joe Biden was insinuated?
Actually, I do believe and I do hope that Russian people would feel these sanctions, because it's not only Putin who is giving the orders to bomb the civilian objects and the peaceful cities of Ukraine. It's pilots and soldiers who are pushing buttons, and they are throwing bombs on the objects, like in Mariupol, as I've said, on the drama theater with 1,500 people in the shelter, with no soldiers, with the children, with a huge inscriptions, children. It was a Russian pilot who pushed the button and who made this bomb to destroy the building and to kill a lot of people. Actually, in Mariupol, we will witness something the most cruel and the worst military actually situation in Europe for decades, because I think that we will have tens, thousands of killed people actually. And Russians, they should answer why they are doing this to Ukraine. This so-called denazification, deliberation or something, but actually when I was again fleeing out from Mariupol, I passed and I was asked different questions on approximately 25 checking points of Russians. And they were asking if I'm supporting the nationalistic ideas or Bandera or the regiment of Azov or something like that. I answered that I do not support nationalistic ideas. But actually, the nationalists of modern era are Russians. They are, because they are destroying Ukrainians and Ukraine, actually, with these filtration camps, with their policies of checking the histories of people for some support of nationalistic ideas. It's the same the fascists were doing during the World War II. So I do hope that Russians would feel what sanctions, all the sanctions mean to them. And nice. I do hope that their amount, their number would increase actually. Because, and I do hope that Russian militaries who didn't tell actually the truth to Putin about the real situation in Ukraine, because you remember that they were promising to take all the territory of Ukraine for 3 days, and they could not take even the territory of Mariupol for more than 50 days. So our soldiers are motivated and well prepared. They're protecting our land. And
perhaps Mr. Denis Baktay would like to comment further on what you're saying. Mr. Denis Baktay, do you think the Russian economy will resist more? How do you see Russia's economy? Do you think that Vladimir Putin is living in an illusion, just like our distinguished guest said earlier, that perhaps he's living in his own bubble and he's being lied to by his inner circle? Do you see the economy as the pressing factor to de-escalate the situation anytime soon?
Well, a quick answer to your second question will be the speech of the head of the Russian Central Bank, Nabiullina. Mrs. Nabiullina said that the Russian resource will be enough. There will be no problem within the upcoming 2 or 3 months. But after 3 months, the Russian economy also will have to take precautions, she said. So the speech of the head of the Russian Central Bank points out some upcoming disasters or some unpleasant conditions. Let's say some unpleasant conditions for the Russians, first of all. Secondly, I also agree with you and with the other participants on the issue that certainly, indeed, now Putin is now living in some illusions because he wouldn't have allowed such great mistakes for Russia, for example, 5 years ago, I suppose. Because first of all, he thought that all the Ukrainians or a large part of the Ukrainians would welcome the Russian forces when they began to invade Ukraine. But he couldn't see the differences among the regions of Ukraine, where a large part of Ukrainians perceive themselves as a distinct nation. He couldn't see that, first of all. Secondly, he ignored the fact that the Ukrainian army is not the Ukrainian army, which was in 2014, when it surrendered the Crimean Peninsula without any resistance. Now, the Ukrainian
Speaking
army
of the Ukrainian army, Mr. Bektay, sorry to cut your thought, the Ukrainian military announced Monday that it repelled 7 attacks by Russian forces in the past day and destroyed 37 military vehicles and their aircraft. The attacks were repelled in the direction of Luhansk and Donetsk, according to a statement from the armed forces of Ukraine. And here I would like to ask Rector Mykola Trofomenko again. Do we consider that the Ukrainian army is taking back its force in the region after 2 months of Russian dominance? I mean, Ukraine did surprise Russia and the world by standing up to the Russian army and putting up a good fight, actually. But are we at the peak of the conflict yet? Will there be any possible and logical resolution? How do you see this in general?
As you can see, and actually I checked the situation, I traveled from Lviv to Kiev using the road through the Ukrainian city of Zhytomyr, where a lot of battles were actually occurred during the last weeks, and now it's totally free from Russian soldiers, with a lot of broken tanks and other vehicles, military vehicles of Russians actually. So I think that it was a really surprise for Russians, as I've said previously, I think that the Secret Service of Russia and they made a mistake, and they were telling to Putin the information he wanted to hear actually. As it's really a problem of all the countries with a totalitarian regime, because they're afraid to annoy their leader, and they're telling him the information that would be very good to hear actually. And it was really a huge mistake of Russian forces. And now, as our president and the commander-in-chief said, that we are waiting, and actually we are witnessing now the beginning of the most important battle for Donbass. And Russians are taking their troops to the so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and they are bombing the cities, not occupied cities of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, and they're trying to win this battle actually. But Ukrainian forces
Thank you, Mykola Trofimenko. Please, we're running out of time and we have only roughly 1 minute left. I would like to give a final word for Mr. Volodymyr Solovyin. As Russia's anticipated offensive in Ukraine's eastern Donbas region looms, Kiev's need for heavy weapons system is acute. At the top of the list are fighter jets, something the European Union and the United States have been reluctant to provide. Why this reluctance, according to you, though? Can you hear me? Apparently we can't hear. Sorry, apparently we cannot hear you. There seems to be a technical problem. So for here, I should just conclude the show. Thank you, dear viewers, for tuning in to our channel. Thank you, dear guests, for accepting our invitation and giving this thorough analysis. That's the end of our news or our coverage. Goodbye.